Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dangerous Ideas. I'm Leecamp, one of the most censored comedians and journalists in America, and thank you for being here. If you're here, you're likely into like a world where we don't all kill each other and where we have sustainability and like a world where actually people could just live and just be in a post-scarcity world where we don't have to all murder and oppress each other. That's what I'm into. I hope you're into it too. And we're going to discuss some of that stuff. But a lot of this episode will be about Israel and about the genocide they continue to commit. Today, I will be joined later at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific time by Abby Martin, internationally known journalist, and one of these journalists who has been nonstop courageous and in the front, the vanguard of talking about the apartheid state of Israel, the oppression of the Palestinian people, of the Gazans, the open air prison that it is. She put out an incredible film called Gaza Fights for Freedom, and yeah, I'll be talking to her starting in about half an hour, but we got plenty to get to before that. I'm going to bring you the lawsuit that is actually being put forward in front of the UN, and it actually this is rare, so it actually has some power. Is being brought by South Africa, accusing Israel of genocide in very legal terms, not in the way that you and I tend to say Israel's committing genocide, which is, I looked at it and I saw it. It's goddamn genocide. Like, that's how we do it, and how average people do it. But these are actually like literal legal terms of genocide. And as I've said, it is the dictionary definition of genocide as posted on the Holocaust Memorial Fund's website. If you don't want us to know Israel, then you need to take it off your websites. But anyway, I want to get to you some of they have documented, that South Africa case has documented many of the times that Israeli government officials have admitted. And I've been covering this a lot, but many of the ones I'm going to be reading to you and bringing to you are not ones I have gotten to. But the admissions of the goal of Israel is ethnic cleansing, which that's kind of rare in the history and the annals of genocide committing awful human people. They don't generally admit it to the level that Israeli government officials have been. So that is pretty incredible. And I will be bringing you those. But yeah, let's just get into it. Please hit thumbs up. Please hit share, and make sure you hit subscribe or follow. And when you do that, click the bell icon, or else you will not be told about my videos. I live stream 4 days a week, and I'd love for you to be finding out. I'd love for you to find out about each and every one of them rather than not hear that it's happening, which seems to be common for my career. Is because I'm suppressed and censored, you're just often not told that any of my stuff exists. But so to get into some of the latest updates, over 23,000, these grim markers that we continue to touch on each and every day. Over 23,000 innocent people have been killed. Gazans have been killed since October 7th as Israel rains bombs down indiscriminately. 23,084 people to be precise. That includes 9,600 children. So almost a third of them are children, or over a third of them are children. It is just an insane number of people murdered. And that is, that's the number murdered, but over 23,000. But we're talking 59,000 people injured in a society, in a system that does not have an operational medical system. The hospitals have been attacked. The medicines and things that are needed for those who are injured are not getting in, which, of course, is part of Israel's plan to make it so that those who are injured often die or often will never walk again, etc., to cause as much harm as possible and achieve as much genocide as possible. For those of you joining a few minutes late, yes, Abby Martin will be here at, or she tells me she will. No, she'll be here at 3:30 Eastern, 12:30 Pacific. So coming up in 25 minutes. All right. So that's one update I wanted to bring you, is the sheer number. We're now over 23,000 murdered. And the the war or conflicts continue to spiral to other nations as well. Israel just killed a senior Hezbollah commander in an airstrike in Lebanon, southern Lebanon. So this is spiraling into a conflict with other nations. However, the United States, Hezbollah is rather strong, and the United States has apparently warned Israel that they would not win a war with Hezbollah, and they should do everything they can to stay out of a war with Hezbollah. Protests against Biden continue because Biden has not actually called for a ceasefire, even though he is supposedly behind closed doors, he claims, trying to minimize the death and destruction, even though his nickname now is Genocide Joe, which I think is sticking pretty effectively. And he's, I don't think the presidency matters as much people as think it does, but he is losing a whole generation of people of liberals that are not as informed as you or I are, that he's losing a whole generation of mainly younger people who now view him as Genocide Joe, especially Muslim Americans, which is a huge population as well, who voted heavily for him. He's losing them. But yeah, it does tend to it does continue to spiral into other nations, and Lebanon's involved, Yemen's involved, Iraq is involved. Actually, that's the next story I want to bring you, is that the Iraqi resistance forces launched a cruise missile against Israel's most important port, Haifa. Now, this is another significant point, is that you don't have to be able to defeat all of Israel and all of the Israeli military to bring their economy to a standstill. This is something Israel has to fear, is that if you just make it very difficult to go to their ports, then shipping gets shut down. If you make it difficult to land planes in Israel, then a lot of their economy gets shut down. So it doesn't need to be all-out war for this to be incredibly painful to Israel's economy to continue this genocide. And I think we are seeing that threats to their port, to one of their biggest ports, and so I have no doubt that that's a big part of the discussions that are going on right now in the higher ups of the Israeli government. And let's remember that the U.S. Set a very nice precedent of being able to attack apparently it's fine to attack the infrastructure, the crucial infrastructure of countries that you're supposedly not at war with, which is what the U.S. did to the Nord Stream pipelines, blowing up 3 out of 4 of them, even though they connected to one of our allies, Germany. It was between Russia and Germany, and the U.S. blew up 3 out of 4 of them. So apparently you can just blow up the infrastructure of countries that you aren't at war with if you feel like it. So there you go. Yeah, that's a nice precedent that the U.S. started, and apparently, because we lead by actions, you're endorsing that idea that you can just blow up or destroy in one way or another infrastructure to countries, and you don't even have to be at war with them. You don't have to admit that it was you. You just go and do it. Also, drone attacks reported on Israeli oil tankers in Maldives or Maldives. I'm never clear on that. Anyway, this is again going to have major impacts on Israel's economy. Initial reports indicate that both oil tankers were seriously damaged by explosions. According to the plan, these 2 oil tankers were supposed to pass through the Bab el-Mandab Strait and the Red Sea. Yemen's army threatened to target Israeli ships and oil tankers in the Red Sea until the end of the war on Gaza. So this is almost definitely the Houthis in Yemen sending drones after Israeli tankers and ships. And again, this can have a major impact on the economy of Israel. And Israel is bringing this upon themselves, right? I mean, they have chosen to commit genocide. They have chosen to kill 23,000 people, 70% women and children. They have made these choices, so they are bringing this upon themselves. If they had responded They still would have been apartheid state. They still would have, Gazans still would have been in an open air prison. So I'm not saying it all would have been fine. But if Israel responded October 7th in some sort of, rational, much, much, much smaller way, I'm not saying I would have been fine with any of it. But I'm saying that a lot of the world would have been like, well, that was proportional. That's how they should have responded. Instead, they've chosen to go with genocide. And as I brought you many times before, I very much believe that Israel knew this or something similar was going to happen, and they allowed it to happen. Even the New York Times has reported that Israel knew about this action and the training for this action for over a year. I mean, this is one of the most surveilled places on earth. And we're supposed to believe that the Israeli government and the Israeli military just had no idea. What? I can't believe this is how Israelis talk. I don't know if you knew this. This is the actual official Israeli accent. I can't believe what Hamas did. That's how they always talk. I don't know if you noticed that. It is strange. I don't know where they got that accent from, but that's the truth. Okay, so now is one of the main stories I wanted to bring you. Before we get to Abby Martin at around 3:30/12:30. So this is from Rania Khalek posted this, although it's not her writing, but Rania Khalek works for Breakthrough News. I also have started a show with Breakthrough News. I hope you've seen the first 2 episodes, which are now up on Breakthrough's YouTube page. Anyway, Rania, done great work for years and years. Proud to call her a friend. Anyway, she posted this is from South Africa's suit in front of the UN, declaring that accusing Israel of committing genocide. And that South African suit has 9 pages documenting expressions of genocidal intent from Israeli officials. As I've brought you some of them, but this is many more. Admissions from various Israeli government officials showing that they wanted to commit genocide, that they want to commit ethnic cleansing, that they are doing that this is happening. Anyway, here are some of them. So this is from the Prime Minister of Israel, and I'm sorry, the writing's so small. It's just how Instagram works, because Instagram blows. I don't know if there is a larger hater of Instagram than I. Okay? I will challenge anyone out there to hate Instagram more than I do. Don't get me off on a tangent about that. Everything about Instagram just sucks, either a lot or a little bit. Even in the functions that you think are like ones you actually want to use, like, oh, it has this slide function, which is what this is. Even in those, still sucks a little. Still large sucking ability right there. Prime Minister of Israel said in a televised address that promised to operate forcefully everywhere. Again, if you are not committing genocide, if you are targeting Hamas fighters, you don't say you're going to hit everywhere. You say you're going to hit Hamas fighters or everywhere Hamas fighters are. But they don't do that. They instead put forward justification for ethnic cleansing. At the time he said this, they had already killed 2,670 Palestinians. Now they've done 20,000 more, including 724 children. That was within just days of October 7th. They also don't mention in these slides that days before October 7th, Netanyahu got in front of UN and held up a map with Gaza and the West Bank erased. So, yeah. He then continued. He said, understand the scope of the mission and stand ready to defeat the bloodthirsty monsters. This is, again, ethnic cleansing talk, because if you consider all Gazans bloodthirsty monsters, well, then it's fine to kill all these innocent people. Bloodthirsty monsters who have risen against Israel to destroy us. He then goes on. I'm not going to read the rest of his quote, but he goes on to basically talk about dark and light, evil and good. And when you try and say all of Gaza is evil, again, that's justification for genocide. Moving on, the president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, made clear that Israel was not distinguishing between militants and civilians in Gaza, stating in a press conference to foreign media that it's an entire nation out there that is responsible. I mean, could you sound more genocidal than saying that? We want to kill their entire nation that is responsible. He continues, it's not true this rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved. It's absolutely not true, and we will fight until we break their backbone. He's claiming there are no civilians not involved. And even if you were out of your mind and you wanted to believe that every adult in Gaza was involved in the October 7th attack, even if you were an insane person and you thought that, you were that dumb that you thought every academic, every doctor, every lawyer, every social worker, every healthcare worker, even if you wanted to believe every adult were involved in the October 7th attack, that still leaves roughly 50% of the population, because roughly 50% of the population is children. And you're telling me every child, every 2-year-old, even if they don't speak the language yet, even if they're walking around pooping in their pants, you're telling me that kid was involved in something Hamas militants did? It's pure insanity, and it is genocidal talk. It shows genocidal intent. He then continues, we will uproot evil so there will be good for the entire region in the world. Again, talking about the whole region. The Israeli Minister of Defense said that Israel was imposing a complete siege on Gaza. That a siege obviously means cutting off everything to Gaza: water, food, medicine. He then continues, in case you didn't know what a siege means, he goes, no electricity, no food, no water, no fuel. Everything is closed. We are fighting human animals. Again, ethnic cleansing talk. And we are acting accordingly. He says the Gaza border that he had released all the restraints. Again, basically saying we've released all the restraints. We can commit war crimes. We will commit war crimes. I mean, it's funny to go through them because, you know, if it weren't so dire, it's funny to go through them because it's like, guys, if you wanted to do what you're doing, which is commit genocide, and you wanted to get away with it, stop saying you're doing that. Because the way to get away with it, sadly, is to just cover up your intent and pretend it's not your intent. But here they are publicly saying it over and over and over. Israeli Minister of National Security on November 10th said, to be clear, when we say that Hamas should be destroyed, it also means those who celebrate, those who support, those who hand out candy. They're all terrorists. They should all be destroyed. Anyone who handed out candy to someone should be murdered. Does that sound like a rational human being saying that right there? Israeli Minister of Energy and Infrastructure tweeted out, all the civilian population in Gaza is ordered to leave immediately. We will win. All the population is ordered to leave, which is in order for ethnic cleansing, in order for, we are cleansing this entire area of your ethnicity, of your race, of your people. This is, they're calling for ethnic cleansing. They might as well drop pamphlets from the plane saying it's time to ethnically cleanse you. Israeli Minister of Finance on October 8th said, we need to deal a blow that hasn't been seen in 50 years and take down Gaza. All of Gaza. They didn't say that one. They didn't say take down Hamas. They said take down Gaza, the place. Israeli Minister of Heritage said the north of the Gaza Strip, more beautiful than ever. They're talking about how it's been flattened. More beautiful than ever. Everything is blown up and flattened. Simply a pleasure for the eyes. We must talk about the day after. In my mind, we will hand over lots to all those who fought for Gaza over the years. Again, saying paving the entire area, killing everyone there is beautiful, is wonderful. All of this is genocidal talk. All of it is very analogous to the way the Nazis spoke, which, you know, everyone has been pointing out the irony of that. But this has been put together by South Africa to present to the UN of proof of genocide. And I can't really picture Israel successfully defending against this. By the way, they initially, I don't know if they still want him, but they initially asked for their lawyer to be Alan Dershowitz representing Israel, which, yeah, he's having a bit of a moment right now. You know, with all the Epstein revelations coming out, he might not be the guy you want. Deputy Speaker of the Knesset tweeted out, this is October 7th, now we all have one common goal, erasing the Gaza Strip from the face of the earth. Those who are unable will be replaced. I mean, how do you argue against that this is a genocide? How are there people out there still arguing that this is fine, that this is an appropriate response for what Hamas did on October 7th, which we all know many, if not most, of the killing on October 7th was by the IDF. We have now proof of that many of the 1,000 people were murdered by the IDF, just indiscriminately shooting people, indiscriminately bombing civilian structures. Again, I'm not saying all of the murder was IDF, but it seems that a majority was, as horrific as that is. I mean, yeah, so I'm not going to read every one because there's just too many to list here. It's 9 pages long. Head of Israel Army's air operations said, described the Air Force as working together with all the bodies in the IDF when the goal is clear: to destroy everything that has been touched by the hand of Hamas. Now, the hand of Hamas is the government of Gaza. So he didn't say everything that's a Hamas fighter. Everything touched by the hand of Hamas is the entire area because they're the government. So when you say things like that, you're, again, justifying paving the entire 25-mile strip and killing over 2 million people. So, and then, of course, you can get into the admissions just by regular Israeli army soldiers, just horrific shit, celebrating as bombs land down. One Israeli army soldier said, we're chanting and singing, "May their village burn, may Gaza be erased." So yeah, you get into the lower level people, and it's even maybe even more horrific, if that's possible, the stuff that's being said by soldiers. But of course, they're just repeating what's been fed to them by the higher ups. So that's they're guilty of committing genocide as well, but obviously it's the higher ups who sent them off on that mission. And concerning this lawsuit in front of the UN, over 800 organizations, is from Popular Resistance and the International Coalition to Stop Genocide in Palestine. Over 800 organizations globally have signed on to a letter in support of South Africa's genocide case against the state of Israel. A new coalition calls for global mobilization as hearing before the World Court begins on January 11th. So for those of you who want to find this and read more of the details of these 800 organizations signing on, which also has links to South Africa's case and everything, that's at popularresistance.org. They have all the details there. I'll put the link in the chat. The newly formed International Coalition to Stop Genocide in Palestine issued a sign-on letter January 3rd, 2024 that garnered over 800 organizations. And the noted organizations: World March of Women, International People's Assembly, Palestinian-led and Palestinian Solidarity Movements, Palestinian General Federation of Trade Unions, Palestinian NGO Network, human rights and legal groups, unions and religious organizations of all faiths. They've all signed on accusing Israel of genocide. Israel is erasing. They are erasing all support that remained for this apartheid state. And I want to play a clip right now of the Palestinian speaker speaking in front of the UN. So he's speaking to the UN Security Council. It's 6 minutes long. I'm going to play just maybe the first minute.
Israel has reacted with disregard and disdain. Why are they getting away with murder at this unprecedented scale? Because they were never held accountable. That is why they confess to their crimes. That is why they steal our lives, our land, our resources, our money, our past, our present, and our future in broad daylight. Mr. President, one day the massacres will stop. But how will we get over it? How will we get over the mass graves, the inability to bury our loved ones, to offer them a dignified burial, seeing them in plastic bags? How will we get over 1,000 Palestinian children amputated without anesthesia. Can you hear their screams? Can you feel their pain? Can you imagine if they were your own children?
So, yeah, incredibly powerful words from the Palestinian representative. Of course, Palestinian is a non-voting member of the UN. They've never been allowed to actually have a established states. They've never been allowed to vote at the UN. That has been stopped specifically by Israel and the United States. And Israel has made sure that the Palestinian people do not have their own state and cannot have the ability to actually vote and have their voice heard in an actual democratic way at the UN, as opposed to just giving a speech. But there he is, the representative for Palestine, speaking at the UN. I also wanted to bring to you this clip from this is really fascinating, that, and you're seeing more and more cracks in the propaganda trying to defend this stuff. This is from what's his name again? Chaz Freeman, is it? Yeah, Chaz Freeman, former Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Affairs. He's retired now, but of the U.S. So this is a former U.S. Assistant Secretary of Defense for International Affairs, high level in the Defense Department, and also he was the ambassador to, I think, Saudi Arabia. And anyway, he in this interview makes many admissions and points about what we've seen. He agrees that many of the victims of October 7th were killed by the Israeli army in the form of undisciplined fire. I'm going to play that clip in a second. He says that with October 7th, Hamas had two objectives. One, to put the Palestinian self-determination issue back on the global agenda. And he says they have succeeded in doing that, since there is widespread recognition outside Israel that only self-determination for Palestine in the form of a two-state solution can provide security for Israel. I don't know if anything can provide quote-unquote security for Israel anymore after the way they're behaving with this genocide. He says that even in the U.S., which has a larger Jewish population than Israel, many Jews have come to realize that this is the case. Yes, that is true. Such as me. I mean, I didn't just realize it, but anyway. Number two, goal was to give Hamas enormous popularity among Palestinians because they are seen as having stood up, as having been willing to accept death rather than captivity. All in all, he concludes that much like the violence against African Americans that followed slave revolts in the 19th century, the Israeli vengeance against Palestinians won't be remembered fondly by anyone in the future. In fact, he goes as far as saying that when people think of Israel in the past, they thought of it as a refuge for the victims of the Holocaust. And I think that's very true. That's how many people did view it even up to a few weeks ago. And now they will think of it as the home of the perpetrators of this genocide. And I think he's very right on that. But let's play a clip of him speaking here. Chaz Freeman, former Assistant Secretary of Defense of International Affairs.
So are those credible reports stating that actually for quite some degree the Israeli army might be responsible for the dead Israelis on October 7th?
Yes, and there are two reasons for this. One is the Israelis lacked the discipline and the training necessary to respond effectively to the hostage taking that Hamas carried out, which, by the way, was aimed primarily by Hamas at taking Israeli soldiers. The kibbutzim are garrisoned with soldiers. They are military settlements. Many of the people, the men there, some of the women, are in the Israeli reserves, and Hamas sought to take them as hostages. Undisciplined fire by helicopters with Hellfire missiles, or by tanks with incendiary rounds directed at buildings, is what happened. And this is a disgrace in military terms, and it adds to the diminution of the reputation the Israeli defense forces have had for military discipline and expertise. But the second reason is something called the Hannibal Directive.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and that is, given the fact that Israel has an enormous number of Palestinian hostages,
Yep.
people it has put in its prisons, often with no charges, sometimes with fake charges.
That enormous number, by the way, stood at 5,000 prior to October 7th. So before Hamas did anything, before Hamas stepped foot in Israel on October 7th, Israel had 5,000 Palestinian hostages before October 7th. After October 7th, within days, Israel had imprisoned 5,000 more hostages. Now, I don't know what that number is, but I'm sure it's several thousand beyond that. So we're talking, 12 to 15,000 Palestinian hostages held in Israel. So he's absolutely right.
Sometimes with a genuine judicial process conducted by military courts. But it has a huge number of hostages. And many times in the past, Israeli hostages have been exchanged for Palestinian hostages in a vastly disproportionate ratio. So the Hannibal Directive basically says that rather than get into bargaining over a hostage exchange, you should just kill the Israeli hostages along with their captors.
So I've brought that to you a few times, the Hannibal Directive, and the fact that the IDF's goal when someone is taken hostage is to kill the hostage takers, and kill everyone and anyone around. And that is clearly how they behaved on October 7th. And here is Chaz Freeman, former Assistant Secretary of the Defense Department in terms of international affairs, talking about that, and also talking about how many, if not most, of those killed on October 7th were killed by the IDF. It's all horrific, but it goes against all of the propaganda we've been hearing. And anyway, you're seeing higher and higher officials admit that. So I wanted to bring some of that video to you. Okay, I don't want to go any longer because she's finally here. My friend, amazing world-renowned journalist, Abby Martin, and I'm sure you know her work from Breaking the Set to Empire Files and much more. Please welcome Abby.
Oh, please, Lee.
Hey.
Hi.
It is good to see. I always love talking to you. Unfortunately, I don't think much of this half hour is going to have the laughs that you and I often enjoy when we're talking, but
yeah,
I hope you're doing well.
Doing okay. Yeah, doing all right.
That's good to hear. I know everyone's been excited to see you on here. I wanted, before we get into the more recent genocide, I wanted to go back like 10 years to when I was first kind of meeting you and your show Breaking the Set, and you were the first person I'd ever seen. This is before you even had me on the show. I'd ever seen on television, on U.S. television, talking in the way you were about Israel, calling it an apartheid state, calling Gaza an open-air prison. You were the first person I'd ever seen on American television. I'm not talking about YouTube, but on American television. And that was one of many things, but it kind of, blew my mind, both like, how is she allowed to do this? And also, who the hell is she? And did you feel like back then, did it feel scary to be the only one out there doing that on American television? And then also, second part of the question is, did you think 10 years later, most of the world now is calling Israel an apartheid state at minimum, if not a genocidal apartheid state?
Yeah, well, no, it's really great that you bring that up, because this is like a story that I don't tell often now, given like how horrific things are happening now. And so it's like very urgent to talk about the current situation. But back in 2012, during Operation Protective Edge, another like Orwellian weird term, where there was just a genocidal onslaught in Gaza, like they do every couple of years to mow the lawn. 2,200 Palestinians were killed, 500 kids. And I'll never forget this, Lee. I mean, I kind of woke up to that dystopian nature of Israeli propaganda and the Hezbollah that is told to us by Western media and media pundits and politicians. You know, this is like part and parcel with American empire. Obviously, Israel's the colonial outpost, our military garrison in the Middle East. But I think in 2010 with the flotilla massacre, that was the first time I really saw that pervasive nature of propaganda coming out from the Israeli government and just being
this was unarmed protesters trying to bring aid to Gaza, and the IDF dropped people down from helicopters and ultimately murdered one of these unarmed activists.
Murdered many.
Oh, many. Okay.
And it was an American citizen was on board too. It was just a peace flotilla. Like every year there's like peace activists like Medea Benjamin and stuff from Code Pink that take these flotillas and bring wheelchairs to Gaza. And so these commandos, these crazy armed goons, helicoptered in the middle of international waters and executed all these people on board. And I'll never forget, it wasn't Fox News, it was CNN showing a literal IDF like PR propaganda clip, like circling people on board on the ship, trying to fend off the Israeli commandos with chairs because they just executed their friends. And they were just like saying that they were the terrorists and stuff.
And just like circling the chairs and being like, look, they have a weapon.
Well, kill them because they have weapons. I mean,
yeah, they had chairs. Yeah.
So that was like my first real, I think, opening into like, this is really, really messed up, man. And then like 2 years later, I'm at RT and, you know, we were surrounded by Palestinians, Rima and Amira was a producer on my show. And I'll never forget during Operation Protective Edge, they stopped everything that they were doing because they had to continuously check in with their friends and family to make sure that they were alive.
Yeah.
And I was so irate. I remember going off on that big rant. And this is what's so crazy. I like often forget because of how crazy and brazen Israel has become. But I'll never forget that they bombed after I did that rant on air and it became viral like in the Middle East. Israeli forces bombed the Al Shroq journalist tower. And they hit an RT office and actually blew off the leg of one of the RT cameramen there. And I remember the head of RT like wrote a sternly worded letter to Israeli authorities, and they were just like, "You just blew the leg off of our journalist. You bombed a journalist tower." And Avita Lebovich, I think, was the IDF spokesperson who responded saying, "Yeah, of course we knew that there were journalists in the building. RT has chosen to take a side."
Wow.
And it was just like,
I had forgotten that too.
I mean, it's so crazy. I honestly forgot about that until you brought that up. And I mean, I remember going to Palestine 5 years later and everyone was like, "You're that person who did that rant." And I was like, the fact that I'm more famous in Palestine than anywhere else, like it shows the utter abysmal failure of Western journalists to do their basic jobs. I mean, to hold power to account. And now fast forward to today, this is a rogue state methodically assassinating journalists alongside their entire families and still silence from Western media. It is disgusting. How could you call yourself a journalist if you're not speaking out with every fiber of your being about what is going on?
Right. And the Intercept just reported on how CNN has to put all of their coverage through the Jerusalem team of basically, you know, that has IDF censors with them. So basically everything reported on CNN goes through an IDF censor.
Not surprised at all, because when I was there, I went through all the proper paperwork to try to get press credentials to get into Gaza, because of course Israel controls Gaza. And so all the hype about like, oh, try to be Jewish and go to Gaza. It's like, well, you're not fucking letting us. I'm not Jewish, but like, you're not letting people go in because everything's controlled and monitored by Israeli forces. And so when critical journalists want to access these places, they simply deny them. And I was banned for life. I mean, I probably wouldn't be able to get back into 48, but I was banned from going to Gaza for life. And I was told I was a propagandist and an Iranian spy and all this stuff. And it's just like, okay. I mean, they are so careful about shaping the narrative and they just don't allow critical voices inside. That's why they are banning Al Jazeera. That's why they're killing all of the journalists. I mean, in the most brazen way possible.
Over 100 journalists now killed in Gaza. yeah, it does. I mean, I know you have friends there and friends that have been killed since this current genocide started. I'm only in contact with one journalist in Gaza, and he asked me to post something, so I talked about him on my live stream. But then I started to get nervous about putting it as a separate clip online, like I do most of my segments, because I don't want him getting targeted because I, post some of his stuff.
No, exactly. I'm talking to my friends all the time there, and I'm just like, can I share this? And it's just like, I don't want to reveal where they are. I mean, Israel's so crazy that, like, because we are prominent voices that are critics and they already hate us, they literally would do that. Like, just because they're so effing nuts, like they would just kill these people just because. I mean, look at Rifat. I mean, Barry Weiss called him out. He was a viral, beloved Palestinian, and she called him out, and then he gets all these death threats, and then gets like a surgical strike assassination into his apartment floor, the apartment of his sister, killed so many people because he was a critic. And they're doing that. They're going and just taking out all the dissidents under the cover of this quote unquote war.
Yeah, and I've made the point several times that it's not. They can't claim it's an accident, like, oh, he just got hit by a strike, because many of these people that are calling beforehand, apparently they called him beforehand to tell him he was being targeted, and he then left a refugee area so that it wouldn't be 100 people killed. It would just be him and his family. I mean,
I know, you can't wrap your mind around it, man. I mean, yeah, but they're moral. I mean, they call people before they.
Right. That makes it moral.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that they're killing their whole families too. I mean, it's incomprehensible. Like, especially Walid, I think his name is, that Al Jazeera bureau chief based in Gaza. It's like, how much more pain and suffering can one person endure?
They took out his whole family. Right?
His whole family, and then his eldest son yesterday. I woke up to another story of his eldest son in a safe zone, just doing journalism with another journalist, and their car was targeted with a drone strike. And then now he has to bury his eldest son, and then his cameraman was shot with a sniper. And this is what's so dystopian too. They have like robotic, like sniper assassins that they're deploying because they're too cowardly to go and do ground combat, and so they're just sending out these robotic assassination tools to go and just kill these people. And so I think that's what shot his cameraman. And then they literally prevented ambulances from going to help him, and he bled out over the course of like 6 hours. Like, Al Jazeera had like a live stream ticker going saying like, is this really happening? Like, is the world really going to allow our cameraman to die? And then what do you know? No one stepped in to intervene, and so he died.
It's it is so goddamn gruesome. You went to Palestine several years ago and put out an amazing movie about it, which everyone should still check out on YouTube if you haven't. But describe what it was like then, and obviously it was oppressive, and it's horrible conditions, even though that was prior to this just unfettered genocide. But
yeah, I mean, Palestine, like we've been saying, I mean, this has been going on for 75 years. Like, history didn't start on October 7th. I mean, this is, all of the violence is predicated by the occupation and the siege. I mean, the foundation of Israel is based, and it necessitates ethnic cleansing and expulsion of the indigenous people, and it's an expansionist state. When you're engaging in violent and bloody conquest in 2023 and live streaming it for the world to see, it's hard to deny. But for decades, I mean, all we had was Western media dictating this complicated reality. It's a conflict as old as time, and it's all this ancient quarrel over religion. And
it's complicated. It's complicated, Abby.
Colonization is really complicated.
Yeah,
it's really violent, bloody conquest and colonization is super complex. For some reason, not in any other historical lens, just this one that's happening right now. Yeah, I mean, when we were there in I think it was 2016. which seems crazy that it was that long ago. But yeah, we were in the occupied West Bank. We'd spent a month there. We were hanging out with Existence is Resistance, and then Dan Cohen, who was living there at the time. Then we met up with David Sheen for just a couple hours in Tel Aviv, went to an anti-refugee rally where people, like dozens of people, were holding these signs, basically wanting to cast out all Black people from Israeli society. And we went to the Negev desert where they would hold African refugees who were fleeing genocide in Darfur and other countries and saying they didn't want them there. So this tokenization of like Ethiopian Jewish people and, oh, look, we're this multicultural, diverse state where everyone is in the army and Black and white and Ashkenazi, and then like everyone's holding weapons and look, we're all this one big happy family. It's very selective PR for Western audiences, and which is exactly what they do. I mean, everything is designed to placate us because they need our weapons and our aid. Israeli society knows exactly what's going on, and they 100% agree with it for the most part. But I mean, every day is another horror story, Lee, and no other journalists were really on the ground documenting this because everyone who's a Western media corporate journalist just stays in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, and they just reprint IDF press releases pretty much about what's going on. Right. And so when we were there, I mean, it was just like random shit was going on every couple hours that was horrific. In Nablus, the village where Ahad Tamimi and her family were, I mean, there's raids happening every other day where Israeli soldiers and settlers come in and terrorize the village. And there's, the Dawabsha family, that horrific arson attack that burned alive a family, and the only surviving member was a little boy named Ahmed. We went and met with his family and heard about just the horrific nature of settler violence. When we were there, I remember going through Kalandia checkpoint, getting out of Ramallah, going into another section, and there was just indiscriminate fire opened at an elderly Palestinian man who didn't turn around fast enough, I guess, or maybe couldn't read the sign in Hebrew, and so they just unleashed a barrage of bullets at this guy's feet. Amazingly, he wasn't killed. And then when we're going through the actual checkpoint, the Israeli soldiers just like, stay safe out there. It's really dangerous. It's like, yeah, it is.
Yeah, you're making us feel
Palestinians though. And then I'll never forget the first thing I saw when we were leaving the airport, which really just speaks volumes. It was like the first thing I saw was a giant hill with like dozens of Palestinians like walking up this huge hill. And then I remember Nancy Mansour was just like, oh yeah, because they like set up these pop-up barricades and makeshift checkpoints, and then they just make it just all to inconvenience and humiliate and subjugate the native population. So it's like, if they want to, they'll just set up a pop-up checkpoint and then just make you walk 5 miles home just to fuck with you. But yeah. I also saw like an ambulance being searched. And then that's when I realized that policy where they want to prevent people from basically being saved. And so they'll just make up things and say, oh, there could be a bomb or a terrorist in the ambulance. And we see that working in droves today with the claim that, every hospital in Gaza has a terrorist compound underneath.
Right. I wanted to ask you about the hospitals and why Israel would go to such trouble to bomb hospitals and destroy hospitals when it is such terrible PR for them. If they want to try and perpetrate a genocide on the down low, then bombing hospitals is probably not the way to go about it. I've been talking about how I think it's because their goal is to basically kill as many people with disease as bombs.
100%, Lee. I think that, first of all, it's a genocidal goal to completely remove the infrastructure of any health apparatus at all. I mean, because they're already taking out the education sector, all the best and brightest in Gazan society. So like every school, even like the engineering division was just exploded. I mean, entire residential blocks and neighborhoods, shops, and I mean, water treatment plants, flooding the tunnels with sewage and seawater. So these things are very deliberate to make Gaza completely unlivable, even though the UN already had said Gaza was going to be uninhabitable, mostly due to a lack of potable water back in 2020. So this has been like an ongoing slow motion genocide for so long, but now it's ramped up to such extreme levels. But I think targeting of the hospitals specifically is making sure the ethnic cleansing goes forward, because the hospitals are notorious for sheltering. I mean, when you are impaired, you're disabled, you're you're under supervision of a hospital, you can't maybe freely travel. So that's to like get all those people out who possibly can, kill the remaining people who can't leave, and also remove any ability for any refugees to stay behind. And so they completely cleaned out the north, destroyed every hospital. And some contacts that I have that are still on the ground in the north are just like, there are so many atrocities happening day to day, but like no one's here to report them. And then of course the snipers are perched up everywhere. But I think you're right. I mean, it's to accelerate. It's to accelerate the starvation and disease and make sure that everyone's gone.
We're seeing this spiral into a regional war, more so. There's been tit for tat attacks between Hezbollah and Israel. The Houthis are attacking Israel-connected ships and harming their ports and economy that way. I don't know if you have any thoughts on where this is going in that regard.
I mean, we've been browbeaten for the last 2 years about Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and I think rightly so have been very fearful about the potential for escalation into a world war, because Russia's allegedly this rogue nuclear-armed state who's completely out of control, committing genocide, doing all this crazy stuff. I just read a story the other day, and look, this isn't a pissing contest. Obviously, what Russia's doing in Ukraine, look, there's a lot of blame to go around. I think Russia is committing, of course they're committing war crimes in Ukraine. They invaded Ukraine and they're killing a lot of civilians. But I just saw a story that I think really lays bare just how crazy the double standard is. And being reminded that at the beginning of the war, Sky News was live streaming a Molotov cocktail workshop and how to best kill Russian soldiers in the tanks. You'll never see that for Palestine, but I just read a story about how a couple days ago, 30 people were killed in a Russian attack in the Ukrainian city, and it was the biggest attack since the war began, with the most civilian dead, which is horrific. And I want to downplay the horrifying nature of that, but I was just like, oh my God, like the fact that Israel's been killing on average 200 every day, and some days we're talking about 500 to 1,000. I was just like, it is really nuts, actually, when you wrap it around this normalization of mass murder.
They killed more innocent civilians in the first few weeks than the entire Ukraine proxy war. The entire number of civilians killed in the Ukraine proxy war, it's just unbelievably not analogous.
No, it's so crazy. And so when you're looking at the potential for escalation, Israel is an insane rogue state that is armed to the teeth, and they have the full support and backing of the U.S. empire. I mean, it's an appendage of the U.S. empire. That's why all of this is happening, and that's why the U.S. is greenlighting this. And I made the analogy yesterday that it's like watching a mass shooter, like in a Walmart, just live streaming themselves, just picking people off in a continuous fashion for months on end, and the police never come, and we're just like billions of people just watching it.
And the politicians never even say it should stop.
And in fact, it's warranted, and they need to do this for self-defense. And you're just watching it in horror. It's like the worst Black Mirror episode that you could possibly think of, because it's real. And then, and instead of that, the police are actually the ones providing the ammo. So the potential for escalation is massive, because Israel wants more than just Gaza. They're talking about flattening Beirut. They bombed Beirut. They're drone striking people in the middle of a metropolitan city. This is absolutely out of control. They're shooting white phosphorus in Lebanese villages. They are fighting Hezbollah. They've rerouted a lot of soldiers to fight Hezbollah, which I guess is good to get some pressure off Gaza, but it's really scary what's going to happen, because Hezbollah is not going to back down. And they are taking this war, this opportunity under the cover of the war, to do whatever they want. I mean, ethnic cleansing and recolonization of what they believe is their land. And it goes beyond that. I mean, they think that they deserve Syria as well and beyond. So it's very disturbingly, because we're talking about a bunch of fanatical fascists who have the backing of the US empire and are armed with whatever they want to, and they can do whatever they want to, it seems. I mean, you have Biden saying, where's the red lines? Where's the red lines? 20,000, that's not a red line. 20,000 civilians dead, thousands more trapped under the rubble, 10,000 kids. None of that is a red line for Israel. And so they know that they can do whatever they want. And so they will continue to do whatever they want. And this means that things could escalate in terms of Iran. Things could escalate with Hezbollah, and the Lebanese government could, get, I don't know what the red line is for their government and their military to actually get involved, because right now it's just Hezbollah fighting. But with the Houthis in the Red Sea, I mean, this is another really crazy thing that, of course, the international community, of course, issues widespread condemnation about the interruption of commerce, because we really care about property more than we do human effing lives. And so that, it was amazing to see the world come together and talk about that. But I think that is another really, it's amazing what the Houthis are doing, and I fully support them. And they are basically just applying the Genocide Convention that says that you need to intervene to prevent genocide. So they're actually doing the right thing. And it will go down in history books as standing on the side of justice. But of course, the world has to condemn them and say, "Oh my God, this is terrorism." And
and the U.S. has basically declared war against them, even though we won't call it war. We've said that it's a special, military operation or whatever, special project to bomb Houthis.
Yeah, now we're yeah. And then the Iraqi militias too. I mean, Iraq was already treated like our colony. We still have bases there. There's still troops there, and now they're getting attacked by the militias that are, allied, that were basically allied with us to fight ISIS in the past. So it's really, we're playing with fire on so many fronts. It's shocking, because if we're not worried enough about World War III coming from the Ukraine situation and NATO, this could escalate and ramp things up to a ridiculous level. And I don't put anything past the Putinniks.
It's tough to see any positive in such horrific times, but do you feel like this could be a generational shift in the way Americans and so much of the world view Israel just as a whole, and the project of Israel as an apartheid state?
Yeah, I don't think there's any going back from this moment. I think that Gen Z and millennials and Gen Xers, I think that everyone who's like below the boomer age sees now very clearly. It's really hard to not see the truth if you're remotely on social media, because Palestinians are able to dictate their reality for essentially the first time. So we no longer have to rely on the corporate media with its cartoonish, depraved Hasbra to paint Israel as somehow not the aggressor in its genocide of Palestinians. I do think that this unprecedented wave of mobilizations around the world, with tens of millions of people taking to the streets in continuous actions, striking, blocking boats, Elbit Systems factories, all of these things are so encouraging. And it really is going to come down on people's power and people's steadfastness to continue with this, because we cannot rely on the political establishment. They are so detached. So it has to be the youth, and Biden has to be punished. But I do think that this is a turning point. If you are not moved yet, there's something wrong with you. There's something innately wrong with your soul. So I think that anyone who's a human being who has empathy, and who, especially people who pose as progressives or liberals, I think that at this point, it's time to stand on the right side of history, because history is going to judge us all. But I am optimistic about that. I'm optimistic about Israel not being able to maintain itself in the way that it has been, as this beacon of democracy in the Middle East. I think that the mask has been ripped off, is an understatement.
I highly recommend everybody check out on YouTube Gaza Fights for Freedom. It's such an amazing film, and it is as important today as when you first put it out. Where else can people follow all your awesome work?
Thanks, Lee. Check it out at GazaFightsForFreedom.com. You can check it out in tons of different languages: Arabic, Spanish, and also please host screenings, because this film is really a call to action, and it's kind of a tool for activists, because it's very clear cut. It's one of the only films out there on the issue that is unabashedly from a Palestinian point of view, and depicted by Palestinians themselves to show their resistance. And of course, a clear indictment of Israeli war crimes. When we made the film really quickly, at that moment, I said, if only people can see this, then they would know the nature of Israel, and they would know the blatant war crimes that are taking place in broad daylight. And it was all based around the Great March of Return, where over 200 people were killed by sniper fire, including protected categories of the Geneva Convention: journalists, medics, press, and disabled people. Children. Sorry, I think I said children, press, medics, and disabled people. Yeah. And so fast forward to today, I mean, that many people are being taken out in single airstrikes. And so it at the time, I thought it was the most egregious thing Israel had ever done. So it kind of puts it in a new context today. But I think it shows you that this, people who maybe are on the fence or who still think that somehow Hamas is really the goal here, the eradication of Hamas, just watch this documentary, because they claim that everyone that they killed was Hamas and was a human shield essentially for Hamas. And it's outlandish. And the film really lays bare like what, the genocidal intent and the fascistic nature of Israeli society, that you can just pick off people in the scope of a sniper, rifle, and just pick off children one by one. And this needs to stop, Lee. It needs to stop. And it's astounding to me that the world is just tacitly letting Israel get away with this, and South Africa is the only country who is standing up. I really hope that this is a new world order emerging, with countries that are not going to be just cowering in fear of repercussions from the U.S. empire and its junior subordinates, because we need something to give here.
Yeah.
Israel needs to be held to account.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Abby. And I hope all the people you're in contact with over there are safe and continue to be safe. And thank you for being such an amazing lodestar, and your incredible courage. Thank you for all that.
Have me back on. We can talk about something funny.
Yeah, exactly. Next time it's going to be hilarious.
Hilarious. Okay. Much lovely.
Thanks, Abby.
Camp, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that. Today, I didn't go over to Rumble exclusively, but for any of you who don't know my stuff and are just following it for the first time, normally my full live stream is just at rumble.com/leecamp, as well as my locals page. That's rumble.com/leecamp. So if you're new to my stuff, please go over there right now and click subscribe and follow, and then click the bell icon. That is the only way this show will continue. Please obviously check out Abby's stuff. And if you haven't seen Gaza Fights for Freedom, you should totally watch it on YouTube. It's free to watch there. You guys are the best. I will be back tomorrow with another live stream. I do Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. However, this week I have to travel, and so I will likely not be doing anything Thursday or Friday. But join me tomorrow at 3 p.m. Eastern, noon Pacific. And yeah, please make sure you subscribe at rumble.com/leecamp. But yeah, I'll see you tomorrow, 3 p.m. Eastern, and keep fighting out there.